But it became clear that if I was going to actually reach my vision and reach the impact, that it wasn't going to be on my shoulders alone. And I feel like the older I get, the less I really want to do. It's not that I'm lazy. I'm just really picky with where I invest my time, because time is the only thing I can't get back. It's the only commodity I have that's non-replaceable and not guaranteed, right? So I'm very choosy with my time, but I give very generously is the flip side of it. But I brought on an employee in at the end of 21 to do something that was getting rid of what I didn't like to do, right? Her position evolved in such a way that she's now my COO. And I really do credit her with the tenacity, the strategy, and the forward thinking that has built systems that rival. I'm like, put me in a ring. We're going to win, because it's just pretty phenomenal what our back end looks like. Now that back end keeps us very lean. It keeps us very nimble.
Welcome back to The In Factor, where we explore the entrepreneurial mindset through real stories, hard-earned lessons, and the power of perspective. I'm your host, Dr. Rebecca White, and today's episode is all about finding your zone of genius and learning to lead and grow from that space. Joining me today is Leslie Hassler, founder of Your Biz Rules, a coaching and strategy firm that helps entrepreneurs scale their businesses with clarity, confidence, and sustainable growth. Leslie's mission is rooted in alignment, helping her clients match their business strategy with their personal strengths so they can grow in a way that doesn't just generate revenue and meet the needs of their clients, but it feels right to them. What I love about Leslie's approach is that she doesn't offer cookie cutter advice. She sees each business and each founder as a unique blend of experience, ambition, and yes, superpower. Leslie knows that when we really understand what we're naturally great at, we can lead with more clarity, communicate with more confidence, and build systems that support who we are, not just what we want to achieve. Her journey into entrepreneurship wasn't linear. In fact, she shares how she had to hit pause, do a pivot, and focus more on what had meaning for her. Today, she's helped countless business owners go from overwhelmed and underpaid to aligned, profitable, and growing. So here's your mindset moment for this episode. Your greatest business breakthrough often comes from your deepest self-understanding. Sometimes it takes someone else, a coach, a mentor, a friend, to hold up the mirror and help us see our strengths clearly. And once we do, we can begin building around them with intention. And we can know that our superpower isn't just about ego, it's about alignment. That's where real momentum begins. So I want you to think today, what are you really good at? What are your strengths? And how can you leverage those into your business? And if you're not sure, you may need to find someone that can help you figure all this out. So before we dive in, I do want to remind you that something exciting is coming soon. We're getting ready to launch the In Factor Plus. It's a new platform designed to help you build your entrepreneurial intelligence. You'll be able to explore founder stories and use that wisdom to grow your own mindset and strategy. So stay tuned over the next few weeks. We'll be sharing more very soon. Now let's get into this smart, energizing conversation with Leslie Hassler. Leslie, thank you for joining me today on the In Factor.
Howdy, Rebecca. I'm excited to be here. We're going to have
I'm very excited to have you on the show. You help businesses scale, which I think is small businesses scaling is probably one of the biggest problems and challenges that I've seen with the entrepreneurs that I've worked with. It's really tough. That's a real scary period there where you're trying to go from maybe being a solo entrepreneur launching to really growing and building your team and developing your customer base. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Leslie. How did you get into this small business scaling strategist business that you're now running?
Your Biz Rules, we founded in 2014. We're going on 11 years in this company. And a lot of times I get that question, like, how'd you get here? And I'm like, well, this is my second business. So I learned a lot in the first business, for sure. And I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I will say though, that while I did not realize it at the time, every life experience, every trial, tribulation, success, and failure was building me up to Your Biz Rules. And I tell people all the time, my first business really was a prison, of my own making, by the way. And Your Biz Rules is really the playground. And so even as we've expanded, and we currently have a staff of about 9. We do a lot of fractional C-suite services for our clients, meaning we can be the one-stop shop for so many people. But even as a team, we're just like, the sky's the limit, baby. What do we want? How can we get there? How can we make it easy? How can we make it fun? And I think that's a different conversation than that I would have had in 2007 when I first opened up my first business, right? Where I'm like, how hard can I work? I can earn my way to success, because I trust myself. And I will say, the number one thing that I think being an entrepreneur has shown me is that it's a journey, not a race. It's, maybe a marathon, if you think of things a little bit. It is about longevity, resiliency, and making your way through.
Yeah, that there's so much in there to ask you about. First of all, where did you get the name Your Biz Rules? Coming up with a business name
Yeah.
is challenging. So
Oh my gosh.
how did that come about? And your other business was Designs by Leslie, is that right?
So Designs by Leslie is our corporate name, and that
Okay.
is where the first business started. But coming out into that business, we actually changed names. So I'm a queen at trying to find the right name.
It's challenging.
So it is challenging. And Designs by Leslie, I mean, if you understand, like, I found out on a Wednesday that I wasn't going to have a job by Friday, and I opened up a business by Monday. Designs by Leslie was as best as I could do in 3 days. And it worked for a while, right? We still maintain it. It's our corporate name. Your Biz Rules, though, was a journey to exploration. And I am going to tell you that I came about this name in a highly unconventional way. Most of our listeners probably would not have gone where I went first. And in part, I went there because nothing else was sticking. Like, I think for a while, our company name was CEO Mindset. And people would go, what does that mean? So you do X? And I'm like, no, that's not what we're doing. Darn it. Back to the drawing board, and trying different iterations. But really what I wound up doing, I wound up doing an exercise called Soul Journey. And it was purely around business and understanding who I was at my core, because at that time it was just me and the company, who I was at the core, what I was trying to achieve, what the vision was, and then wrapping a name around that. And here's the really funny thing. Now, if I say Soul Journey, most of you are going to start Googling, going, what the heck is that? And it's an experience for sure.
Yeah, because I am very curious.
Yeah, it was a combination of guided meditation, of inward focus, if you will, of really dreaming a little in some ways, having a little bit of fantasy dream in there. So it is an interesting interesting experience. If you want to know more, I'll have to go back and I know the first name of the woman that did these things, but I would have to go back and look at the last name.
So it was guided by somebody else, actually.
It was guided by somebody else. There were 4 or 5 other businesses going through the same experience. So it was interesting to see it from that perspective. But when I came out and I'd said, Your Biz Rules, people are like, oh, I get it. And we talk about this as a firm all the time because we know that we have connection with a client when they internalize it. And the internalization of it will be my biz rules. And so your biz rules at its core, if you looked at what it is about some structure, right? And rules in the use of the word is almost a double or triple entendre because your business does need some structure. It does need some rules, right? It is also this kind of case of you have the ability to write them, that they need to be uniquely you, right? And that's, I think, one of the greatest freedoms we have in entrepreneurship. And then there's the whole, like, we want you to be so in love with your business that you do go around and say, you're like, my biz rules, it's kind of
I
a
love,
little bit of humor in there, but that's who
yeah.
we are in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. I mean, we're very good at what we do. We're very smart. Our staff is amazing, but we also like to have a little fun and have a little humor because we spend so much time in our business. If it's not fun, if it's not a joy, if it doesn't add to the quality of our life, I I would be the first to ask you then why? Why this? Because there's so many things you could be doing with your time.
I love where you're going with all this because, entrepreneurs aren't really separate from their business,
No,
our
not really.
lives and who we are. And so there's a lot of not just, you know, guidance that we need and help that we need to get our business going. How am I going to market this? What to help
Hmm.
me with finances, help me find people. But there's also this help me cope, help me,
Yeah.
build my mindset, which is what I love, the whole
Yeah.
mindset piece, and help me become more self-aware and more capable, really, of like you said, building not only personal resilience but a resilient business.
Hmm.
And Leslie, I have to ask you, we are probably operating in one of the most uncertain times that
Mm.
most entrepreneurs have been operating from an economic perspective. And there's just a lot going on in the world right now. When you work with entrepreneurs, do you see a lot of stress around that uncertainty? And what does your business do, if anything specifically, to help entrepreneurs cope with that uncertainty?
So I like what you brought up because being a business owner is complicated. When you have a job, you can check out emotionally, right? It's easy to check out emotionally. When it's your skin in the game and when others, especially, rely upon you, man, that's a lot harder to do. It's a lot harder to have separation. And so, mindset, belief, habits, all of these things impact your success when it comes to that. Uncertainty. So I don't want to diminish the level of uncertainty that we're in. I was just reading, I'm in Texas, and so we have a Federal Reserve Bank here in Dallas that does surveying. It's one of the largest surveys in the nation. We have a very active small business community, and I was just going through the findings just recent, like 20 minutes before we got on the call, looking at the temperature, the thermometer of other businesses in the service sector, especially because I'm in the service sector. And the uncertainty is felt. It is dichotomous for me. What we're seeing is the bucket of the haves and the have-nots, meaning there are people that are more directly impacted by the uncertainty, and then there's a group of people that are not. And it's not a majority either way. But the truth of it is that emotionally it is felt. It is felt. Now, that's reality of today. I am just going to put this little truth bomb out there, and it's not going to be a popular one. But the truth is, the uncertainty has always existed. The ignorance of the uncertainty is what has been wiped away from people's eyes. I think COVID had a really, I say COVID tore off the cash flow mask. Suddenly people had cash flow problems. No, actually, you always had cash flow problems. The problem was there was enough going and you didn't You weren't paying attention to that area because it wasn't screaming at you. You didn't feel pain. So I will say, I do think uncertainty is our only constant, and we're looking for status quo. We are in an age, and we have been building this way for 20 years, regardless of the economics, the politics, the religion, anything. Our growth, our rate of change, our rate of growth, if you will, has been exponentially magnifying each and every year. That is also a large contributor to the uncertainty. We have businesses, the amazing thing, we have businesses that are being launched this year that conceptually, economically could not have existed 5 years ago.
Yep.
10
Yep.
years ago, right? So it's a duality of a situation. It is both horrible and wonderful at the same time. And we seem to be focused on how we're feeling about it and experiencing it as trauma. I'm curious, what if we actually accepted change as a factor we can't control, but a factor that we can capitalize on? If you looked at it from a different lens of something happening to you, which is really the trauma of it, because you feel out of control, right? Something happening directly to you, and suddenly said, I have the ability to capitalize on this. What would change? What would you do differently? Where would you shift your business? We have some new clients coming on. You asked, like, how do we help with this? Hey, we're always asking this question. And there's a lot of ways to build this into your strategy. But like, we have a clients coming on to basically the work that we're going to do with them is redesign the business model, redesign the operational model, and redesign the financial model. Because what they've done up till now no longer works for where they want to grow.
Right.
Now,
Right.
is that a bad thing? Not to me. It's an evolution. It's evolving.
It's just learning to embrace change. But, I love where you went with this answer. I have a friend, actually, it turns out he's from Texas. He's from San Antonio originally, but the way he explained all this and the theory that he developed, he called the full lake theory. And he
Okay.
lived in San Antonio. There was a beautiful lake there,
Yeah.
but they had to drain it to do some work. And there was
Yeah.
all kinds of crap at the
Of
bottom of
course.
the lake.
Right.
And so what you're talking about is when the lake's full, when sales are,
It looks so
going
beautiful.
gangbusters, there's still all that crap on the bottom of the
Yeah.
lake.
Yeah.
But when the lake is drained, you can clean it out, right? You can
Right.
see what the problems are. So, I look back, I remember COVID and I was doing the podcast and I interviewed a number of companies that really were only able to exist because of COVID. Now, certainly there was a lot of loss and pain and fear, and we have to acknowledge all that. But so many opportunities were created out of that. And so what I'm hearing you say is that, we have to put on a mindset of opportunities,
Yeah.
a mindset of opportunity recognition, kind of look at things through a different lens and be willing to make changes. I love where you're going, and I love your energy and enthusiasm. You must be an amazing coach working with these businesses because you've got such great energy and enthusiasm. I'm feeling it through the remote conversation that we're having here. How did you tell me about your work experience and your life up to the point of Leslie by Designs to kind of what led you to want to do this kind of work?
Oh, golly gravy. There's a book by David Epstein and it's called Range, and it's where, how generalists thrive in a specialist world, I believe. Yeah. Why generalists triumph in a specialized world. I still have it up there because I read this book maybe 3 or 4 years ago and I was like, oh, he's followed me around my entire life. Because if you looked at my life experiences, they're not linear at all. There are sometimes My husband says I'm a librarian's worst nightmare. Are sometimes like I will read a book up to a certain point in time that I get the answer I'm seeking and then I put it away. I may never pick up that book again. And I'm totally okay not finishing the book. Right. So if you look at it professionally, my first degree is in journalism. Ready for that? I then worked in traditional advertising agency side. I then worked in interactive advertising agency side, and this was Web 1.0. Like we were having to convince people why they needed to have a website. Then I went back to school for interior design, and then I worked interior design for 7, 8 years. And then came into this business, right? Which you're just like, wait a minute, what?
Now, was Designs by Leslie originally interior design?
It was. We did
Okay.
interior design and construction residential. So I did design build essentially before it was really called design build, and mostly in remodels and things like that in the Houston area. Was successful at it. It wasn't a business that fed my soul though. And that was something I had to come around to and understand what it was that fed my soul. Because up until then, I just leaned in where my natural talents were. What I found, and we talk about this so much. We talk about a lot of the, I don't know, theory as a team or the thought process behind things. We love a good assessment because it helps us help people understand themselves better. And if you can understand yourself in business, then we can design the business to align with you in that way. But we talk about the fact that, you've heard, is it the 4 zones? There's a zone of genius, zone of genius, zone of competency, things like that. Well, my zone of competency is actually quite large. And majority of our staff members would say the same, but they would fall under that generalist type of moniker, right? And how do we then get into your zone of genius? So my goal is to continually tighten my circle of zone of genius and let go of my zone of competency. That's hard when you're good at something, but maybe you don't love it or you're not great at it, but you're capable. Right? And I think that capability, when you're not good at something, is super easy to let it go. If you don't love something, super easy to let it go. But we struggle in that area of zone of competence. And most entrepreneurs are pretty self-reliant, right? To be able to let something like that go. I don't know. That's a little bit weird, but I have worked in accounts payable and accounts receivables when I was in high school. I've worked in so many different elements, but I'm always curious. And I think I'm like, oh, wow, what does that look like? I'm going to go figure it out. And I will, it's how we brought on AI 3 years ago in our company, is because we were willing to be curious. And I have a curious team. They're like, yeah, let's go figure that out. They're like, well, okay, some things we need to risk mitigate. Great. We'll mitigate those risks. Now let's go play. And it's just a little bit of a different attitude, perhaps, of operation in a business. And we try to impart some of that for our clients. But again, going back to the name, it's not our job to make your business look like us. It's our job to help you make your business look like you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of competence versus genius as well, because we only get to our greatness really when we're playing in that genius space. Yep. But many entrepreneurs start out small, maybe as solopreneurs, and they bring on people, and that's your whole sort of shtick, I think, if you're in the scaling space, is really helping entrepreneurs probably let go. I mean, that's got to be a big part of it. And so how do you do that? How do you coach them? Because there is the confidence, like I can do that and I can probably do it better than somebody else that I hire. And I can do it quicker than training them, because that's going to really take my time. And I have worked with so many entrepreneurs over the years that just could not let go of the control. They could not let go of doing. And so they worked in the business too much and not on the business enough. And I'm assuming, maybe it's not fair to assume, but I'm guessing you have to deal with that. And so how do you do that? What are some of the things that you do to help people kind of reach that point of letting go a little bit?
Yeah, so I think there's some interesting way to answer that question. Of course, it's something we deal with. It's something we deal with for ourselves, as well as helping our clients with their ideal path. Some people, it's not employees. Other people, it is. Generally, though, it involves other people because at some point in time, you have a max capacity unless you're selling something that's truly, truly, truly scalable. Like you could sell 1,000 of them, deliver 1,000 and not lift a finger. That's truly scalable. Most businesses are to that level. And there are lots of tactics that I'm going to say most everybody has learned and heard. There's delegation, there's technology, there's processes. And yes, those are all needed. But when it fails, I want to talk about the reason behind the reason. And this is really what it comes down to. And we explore this. So I've written 2 books. One's First This and That. The second one's Scaling Rich, which is outcoming. And it's really a part of Scaling Rich in there is to talk about the value that you as the business owner get as a human. The reason we're so locked into the hustle and grind is that the sense of accomplishment, the sense of earn, like you have to earn a reward and earn, success, is so strong that when I ask you to let go of the work, you cannot because your value is wrapped up in the work, not in the impact, not in the potential, but in the work. And a lot of times when we take the work away, then we struggle with what our value is. And let me give you like a easy peasy story. So we had a client come in. It was actually a mother-daughter owners. And we were beginning to, I guess, facilitate that generational transfer of leadership in the company. And the daughter's like, well, I'm getting married in October. And this was like December. She said, I'm getting married in October. And I promised my husband that I would go on a month-long honeymoon and not do work. I said, okay, we can handle that. I said, but you're going to have to listen to me. Can't fight me. You're just going to have to do what I ask you to do, and we will get you there. So for 9 months, we worked the whole thing. And what was so amazing is in the process, what we wound up doing is totally reorganizing the team because they had the right people on the bus, but not in the right seats. So we got the right seats, everybody in the right seats, right? And then we're like, okay, now we need some cross training because you're too small of a team to be in silos. We need the ability to back each other up. So not just the owner could lead for a month, but anyone on the team could lead for a month and it wouldn't hurt the business. Right. So we worked through all of that. We had a good, 6 weeks of play where we were transferring. The owner was still there. Our client was still in the business, but we were doing that whole let's transfer these responsibilities and let's just take it slow. Let's just take it slow. So no one person's like, oh my gosh, what did you just do to me? She goes on her honeymoon. We manage the business along with the mom and the team through the month. She comes back and we're at our first meeting after being back. She goes, Leslie, I had to pour a glass of wine. I sat down to my laptop Sunday night, and I opened it and I was just absolutely terrified about the amount of emails. And I was like, oh, I'm going to bite. How many emails? And she's like, 100. And I'm like, what? 100 for a month? She goes, yeah, it was kind of amazing. And I was like, okay, what were the emails? She goes, Leslie, not a single one of them needed me. They were my team keeping me appraised. They were my team letting me know things were being taken care of. It was all team communication, no client problems, nothing popped up. And at this point in time, I'm thinking, score, success. But then something really interesting happened. Within 2 or 3 weeks, my challenge to the owner was, don't take it back. Let your team have it. See what they do. Because what we were finding is that the invoicing was smoother. It was so many things were smoother and getting done better, having the team do it. So I said, don't take it back, but let's just observe. Let's see what's happening here. And one of the meetings, like I said, about 3 weeks later, she goes, Leslie, I'm like, yeah. She goes, I think I need to go get a job. And I was like, what? you need to go get a job. You're the owner of the company. What are you talking about? She goes, yeah, but nobody needs me here anymore. And I was like, oh, you're just bored. She goes, yeah, I don't know what I need to do. I was like, phenomenal. I wish you'd told me that sooner. I've got the list. I've got the plan. I was just giving you some time to get back into the flow of everything. Right. And it was finding that moment of where was she going to derive value? Because up to that point in time, the busyness, the constant need, the constant do was where she was deriving value. So this whole journey of scaling really does come down to how well can you change from being the one that gets all the work done to being the one who ensures it all gets done.
Yeah, that's profound, actually, and so hard. Kudos to you for working with her and helping make that happen and so many other companies. Let me ask you about your company. How did you, how have you, have, does that translate to the way you run your company? And if so, where do you find people? How do you find people? What's some of your advice for our listeners about surrounding themselves with people that are good enough,
Mm.
that you can actually do what you're just talking about and keeping
And
them
keeping
too.
that, yeah, keeping is definitely keeps you on the on your toes. So I really started adding team on in my own world probably around 21, 22. Fall of 21 is when I started hiring people
So
again.
you started your company and ran it for a number of years as a solopreneur?
Yeah, I did. And if you look at my first business, I started solo, started hiring maybe in year two to year seven, had team. I won't say I felt successful with team at all. I think like many of an entrepreneur, I had trauma to resolve as part of my learning to be a better leader and a better manager. So there was a period of time to where I just didn't want that. Now, that didn't mean I didn't hire people. I hired a lot of subcontractors, but I looked for highly independent, skilled people in doing so. But it became clear that if I was going to actually reach my vision and reach the impact, that it wasn't going to be on my shoulders alone. And I feel like the older I get, the less I really want to do. It's not that I'm lazy. I'm just really picky with where I invest my time, because time is the only thing I can't get back. It's the only commodity I have that's non-replaceable and not guaranteed. Right. So I'm very choosy with my time, but I give very generously is the flip side of it. But I brought on an employee in at the end of 21 to do something that was getting rid of what I didn't like to do. Right. Her position evolved in such a way that she's now my COO. And I really do credit her with the tenacity, the strategy, and the forward thinking that has built systems that rival. I'm like, put me in a ring. We're going to win, because it's just pretty phenomenal what our back end looks like. Now, that back end keeps us very lean. It keeps us very nimble. As we've hired, we know we are looking for somebody unique. And it's really hard to put it into a job description. And we've been working on 3 years on a job description that can bring us unique, because we're looking for somebody that would fit that qualification of range. Now, each person on our team has a subject matter that they're kind of an expert in and that they can be a resource to the rest of the team. So it's called decentralization, but we're decentralizing the knowledge so that it doesn't rely fully on my brain. But really, in my mind, as I've been building team, what I have thought about is building mini me's who are better than me, and bringing in people that make diversity happen in more than one way. One, visually, people like to work with people that look like them. It's just, we're humans, and that's the way it is. So we want to have a diverse team so that we can serve a diverse population. But then we need diversity of thought. We need somebody that's willing to stand toe to toe in as a staff meeting and say, I don't think that's a great idea. And here's a better idea, or here's a way we can make that idea even better. So we have a very collaborative nature. We have found that all the things that make us really great as a company are actually really difficult things to hire. And at the end of the day, we don't know until you're in the space. And so I will say, you've heard, is it hire slow, fire fast? No, we're fast on both ends, because honestly, I don't know and you don't know until we're working together about, will this work? But I do know it's so interesting. We have a hire that's starting this month. We've got another one in a couple months that are coming on. And I've learned that the inclination of the candidate coming into the door having pause about it working is actually a really good sign for us, because it's a sign of integrity,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And somebody that really does want it to work, that they're questioning, will it work? How will it work? Da, 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 da. So that may be a signal that would turn off a lot of other people. Well, if you're not confident, and I'm like, no, that's a really good thing for us, because it says to me, you want, that matters so much to you, and it matters to us. So if you're willing to work it, we're willing to work it. And don't answer that question for a year. Let's get a
So,
year.
yeah, there's some really interesting things there. And I think you learn over time, right? What works with your culture and what
Yeah.
matters. Now, we talked about this a little before we went on air. You actually work remotely. So is all of your staff remote?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
could you talk a little about some of the things you've learned that work and maybe more importantly, what doesn't work when you've got a remote staff?
Sure. Yeah, we were talking. I said I was remote before remote was cool. And so I like freedom, which is one reason I like remote. I also like a lean business, and I don't really want to pay $8,000 to rent. And so that's one of the reasons we do that. But my staff, a large portion are in Texas, but we've got some staff in North Carolina. And then our staff likes to travel. So we joke that today is Tuesday. I'm in Texas. It's Central Time Zone. Like the things you say to yourself to orient where you are and what you're doing for the day, but an incredible amount of freedom. So one of the things we have found is that in order for us to be successful, one, we have to have an amazing structure. We use Monday.com. It is our primary it's the outline to everything we've ever done. It is one source of communication. We even have a communication guideline that says, if it's this, it's only Monday. Don't talk about it anywhere else. If it's this, it can be in Slack. And if you're texting, it should be like, hey, I just want to let you know you were amazing today, or hey, I'm going to call you and check in on you. But we don't do work in text, and we don't do work in Slack, because it's not scalable. It's not referenceable. And too much casual communication happens outside of a structured environment. Then when I say, hey, Rebecca, did you have a chance to look at that document? I'm really concerned about the tone in paragraph 4. Well, 6 months later, I say, hey, Rebecca, you never got back to me on this. And you're like, what's this? I'm like, I don't remember. It was that document. You're like, well, which document? I'm like, really good question. Right? It's hard to have contextual communication when you're in a virtual environment. You can get away with it-ish if you're in person, but really, it doesn't really fully scale. So I will say we have a structure, and there are some elements of our business that are very structured because they give us freedom. And so I believe fully in the structure will set you free. It seems counterintuitive, but last year I had 2 different team members go on a month-long trip. They're like, okay, my mom wants to go. We had one that went South Pacific. My mom wants to go. I said I would go. It's going to be a month long. How are we going to handle that? And I was like, we just do every day. Like, just do your every day. The team can pick it up, because the Monday is our hive mind, is what I call it. It's the hive mind. Everything's there. So even if I have a client that I maybe specifically haven't met with, they've been meeting with their strategist and their CFO and those things on our team, they could call me and say, Leslie, I have some questions about our last meeting with so-and-so. And I'm like, hey, give me 5 seconds. I pull up and instantly I know what meeting they're talking about. I can scan the conversation and I can look at the person's notes and know exactly what was said. And then I'm like, hey, that person's right. Just I understand. Let's talk about what's scary about this. Right. But that strategy is a phenomenal strategy for you. And here's why. Or I can say, oh, you know what? Maybe we didn't think about X. Let's add X to the equation. And that's a kind of it looks very improvisational on the outside, but it's very planned on the inside. And I will say having an entire team that is on board with that and reaps the benefit of it. It's not just me as the owner. Our entire team wins with this. Means the entire team desires to keep it up. But I will also say that you want a litmus test about whether or not an employee is going to work or not. I can tell in 2 weeks whether they're working. Period. I can tell in 2 days whether they're working or not. Right? And we have a process that helps train people up, train them up or train them out. Sometimes people actually don't want to do work. And
So
that's okay
you
too.
you talked about assessments earlier. Do you do assessments when you're hiring people? Do you put them through a series of assessments?
We do, especially if they're new to us people. I like a variety of things, and then I've just recently learned a new one that I'm intrigued with. So we typically will do a disc because we feel like that's your learned work style, and that tells us a little bit about you. We do know that we move at a really quick pace. So you may feel out of step if you're, in that CS range. You may not like the pace that we work. So we want to look into that. We also like Enneagrams because it tells us more about motivations and the internal parts of things. I just got exposed to Working Geniuses, and my COO and I are talking about that because there's a lot that I like into that. But I think at the end of the day, there's predictive index. There's so many out there. What we need to remember is they're purely snapshots. They're just a snapshot of time. I like strength finders too. That's what led me, one of the things that led me into this business. But where I don't want to get to the point to, and I caution our team against this. And I have an environment right now where we just went through DISC as a team and a nonprofit team. And they're like, oh, you're such a D. And I'm like, yes, however, I have some components of me that are very non-D. Like I'm a DI and I am so high up there, I'm almost on the line. Like it's super, super strong for me. But then I'm sitting here talking to you about structure. Structure is not a D characteristic. Structure is not an I characteristic, right? Structure is a C characteristic.
Yep.
So we can't use those assessments to one-dimensionalize people and to make assumptions. It just puts us in the right ballpark I can understand this is how I probably need to speak to you.
Yeah. I work with students and other, adult learners, and I use a variety of things. One of them is called the entrepreneurial mindset profile. And basically it is shown through, tens of thousands of people that have taken it who say they're entrepreneurial, that entrepreneurs prefer environments with limited structure. And yet, and I know I'm very comfortable with going into a limited structure environment as well. However, I like creating my own structure. I think, for a lot of entrepreneurs, they recognize that if they want to succeed, they need to have some structure. And especially when you're bringing on people, when you're moving from that entrepreneurial company to a more administratively managed company, as you scale and as you grow, it's probably, I read a really interesting article in graduate school. It's very old, but basically the theme of it was the very skills, the superpowers, if you will, the way you work that works in the early stage of being an entrepreneur and getting a company started is what is going to undermine your ability to scale and grow.
Yeah.
The micromanagement, the dealing, the having to be at the center of everything, the lack of structure. And so, I love what you do. I think it's so important for entrepreneurs. I have to ask you, as where you said you're a DI. I think I'm a DIS. What was interesting for me, I thought I did the disc,
Yeah.
and I defined myself one way. I had 10 other people do the 360. They all defined me uh, alike, but different than the way I saw myself. So
Isn't that
when I was debriefed in that, it was actually my friend who had a license to do this kind of work. And she said, "You're delusional." And I'm like, "What?" And she said, "You're delusional." But interestingly, they saw me, I think, in a more favorable light than I did myself.
mm,
So those 360s, I think, can be really powerful. The DIS, I think they call the velvet hammer, and I never thought of myself that way. But the people that know me seem to think that's good. That's a good descriptor.
a lot more velvet than hammer.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a pretty, my mom was more Southern than not. I think the expectations that we have for ourselves. So long way to get to a question. Two things. I'd love to know, what is your superpower as an
Mm,
entrepreneur, and sort of, where do you think some of that came from? Were there examples of your childhood, and things, sometimes even challenging experiences we have. For example, I've been told that my superpower is my ability to get people to do things, to follow a vision and do things.
yeah.
And I think some of that came about because I've been in a lot of roles throughout my life where I had to lead through influence. It was the only
Mm,
way I could really succeed.
mhm.
So what's your superpower, and where do you think maybe some of that came from?
So I wish I had a simple phrase for what I think the superpower is. I know how to describe it. So I'm gonna, since we were talking assessments, I'm gonna talk about it in two terms. So working geniuses and in within strength finders. So my strength finders are my superpower. However, when I first took it, my first business, because I wanted to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, I had no idea what to do with this. And of course, nobody says, "Here's what you'd be good at." They're like, "No, it's so you can learn about yourself and figure it out." And I'm like, I am so tired of that. But okay, fine. So my strength finders are strategic, futuristic, achieving, activating, and individualistic. My entire business is built upon this. And the way that I will summarize that, I suppose, is I can see both the forest and the trees and the path through at the same time. Right. And that is a lot of what this company is built upon, ties back into the name of the business. You can start to see the synergies when I explain the layers to it. Then you're like, oh my gosh, they're everywhere, by intention. But one of the things that makes us so skillful when we're working with our clients is I'm like, just talk to me. And then I'll ask you questions. And I'm like, okay, well, what about this? Is it this or is that? Is it this or is that? And I'm sitting there being, because a lot of people can't put into words what they want, honestly. And we have to have a conversation. I have to strip away all the structure from it so we can just talk. We're just, hey, grab a coffee. Let's have a conversation. And then as they're building they're just talking, what it's doing in my brain is it's building a picture. And then all of a sudden, because I'm very visual, so I'm going to give it to you in visual, it's like these doors of opportunity slide into place. And then as part of the questioning, I'll open up a door of opportunity. And I'm like, well, if you could do X, Y, and Z, would that work for you? No, I actually don't want that. Okay, not that door. What about this? If you could do blah, 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 would you do that? What about this? Da, 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 da. And so what I'm doing through the questioning, which is part of that skill of wonder, well, what if, is I'm discerning, and I'm slowly getting us into something that's more and more concrete. And then once we're concrete, I'm like, okay, great. What do you think about that? How do you feel about that? Oh, it's going to be a lot of work. Like I have one client right now, just had the meeting. That's going to be a lot of work. And I'm like, okay, well, what is easy gets done. So how do we make this easy? Or what's the first thing we can do? Like, you don't need to really know everything. You need to know where you're going. You need to know where you are. And then you have to have the discernment to figure it out along the way. back to our whole uncertainty topic way at the beginning of our conversation, right? And it's just a matter of like, okay, what feels easy, what feels good? What feels easy, what feels good? Because what I'm trying to do is that's the activation part, right? I'm trying to activate to get to achieving because I'm trying to get to a result. And so what we do is we just work with who people are in such a way, which is that almost that people whisper part, which I really liked what you shared with that, but help them work with themselves instead of against themselves. We're reducing the conflict. Well, if it feels like hard work, then you're going to put it off until you have time. But ha ha ha, we never have time. We create time. We, invest in time, so to speak. So how do we change the dialogue so that it becomes easy? And so what we're effectively doing is we're getting this, gradual incremental change over time that yields something really big and beautiful. So long
Yeah.
answer to explain it, but
No,
it's not simple.
it's amazing. I'd love to have an hour to sit down with you and get you to figure out what I'm going to do. And, I'm always, I've done a lot of different things and there's just so many exciting, fun things to do. It's hard to pick sometimes. So, I
Agreed.
have to ask you because you are running and you did before also a consulting business, a service
Mm,
business.
yes.
And you're obviously very good at what you do. How do you
Thank you.
scale yourself when you're in a service business?
Well, service is, there's two ways, honestly. One is if you can break away from the time is money kind of moniker, so that where you're charging for your time, that's a scalable factor there. Not all businesses are like that. We have quite a few law firms. Law firms don't fall into this bucket of possibility, so we have to do it through other means. But the other aspect of it is that if you have a service that relies on something being customized and individualized and creative, then you're likely going to rely on people. And so you do have to open up to what do people look like in a business? My business, I have W-2s. Why? I want commitment. I want skin in the game. I don't want to be pulling people's attention from one thing to the next because of the nature of our work. We have some other clients to where the entire staff is all 1099. And they're on demand. And there's enough regularity that we can keep our 1099s going and there's enough synergy that everyone loves working together, but we always have a backup.
Mhm.
And we have a backup to our backup, right? Because inevitably somebody gets sick, their parents pass, they're out of the business, right? You need to be able to have continuum, um,
Continuity, yeah.
continuity. I'm trying to mix a few words. I do that. But you need to have these things in place. So I've got some companies that are a blend where we are discussing like the new resource that's coming in. Is this a permanent resource or is this a flux resource? And my goal is to keep them operationally lean because back to our uncertainty, we are not in control of the world. I wish we were, but if my children have taught me nothing else, I am not in control, right? I can just make the best of the circumstances I have. So I'm always thinking about the longevity of a business of what if something changed this world of this business in such a way that they could no longer operate the way that they were? How can I help them build a business that can scale, but also can shrink and not put them into debt, not put them over, into a state of depression because they can't figure a way out. And that's why I don't think people actually put enough planning into it is that sustainability and planning for the best and the worst case scenarios simultaneously so that we're scaling in a way that can withstand uncertainty.
Mhm, mhm. Well, let me ask you about, as you how do you find clients? I mean, do you use digital marketing, social media, newsletters, referrals, all of the above? What's
All
been
the
your
above.
strategy around marketing?
All the above. What I will say is we have found that for our clients, we may be the first time that they've used, a coach, mentor, consultant, whatever you want to call us. So we have to build a relationship of trust. And trust is really important in the work that we do. So we find that what works the best for us in terms of marketing is that which establishes and builds a relationship of trust. And that would be speaking, podcasts like we're doing today, the books that we've written. We have a newsletter on LinkedIn that's called the Profitable Growth for Business. And we've been producing articles 1 to 2 a week for 2 or 3 years. And that's where I like to say my stalkers go over there, you know, and then I hear about them when we meet in person. They're like, oh my gosh, I read that newsletter all the time. Right. I do that all the time. Or I see your socials. We had it for a period of time when my kids were younger. I did coaching from the carpool because I had to be, my happy bum needed to be in carpool by 2:30 and they didn't come out till 3:15. Like if I wasn't in carpool by 2:30, it would take me an hour and a half just from 3:15 to pick them up. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? I'm kind of bored. So I just started doing videos. Man almighty, everybody else was in carpool at that time. It was phenomenal. You know, I couldn't go anywhere without somebody mentioning that. So I think we're always looking for what I would say is a little bit more of a blend between active and passive marketing, referrals, word of mouth that does have impact in our business, but we're actively out there doing the things we ask our clients to do, going to networking meetings, showing up for speaking engagements, playing with others, JV partnerships, those types of things. So it takes the whole combination
Yeah.
really to build something reliable.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially when you're doing a service business like you
Mhm.
are. That's you have to build those relationships and that community. Before we, and I have a wrap up question or two, but
Sure.
before we get there, I just wanted to ask you, as you think about the future of your company and like where you're headed, what
Yeah.
does it look like? You're obviously scaling your own business. Yeah, where are you headed with this business?
Well, that's such a big question, isn't it? Um, so the next problem that I'm solving is what does this company look like at $10 million a year in revenue? That's the next thing that I'm building right now. And that's a stretch goal. I'm not gonna lie. But the business at I think here's the way to look at it in your own business. A 6-figure business looks different than a 7-figure. A 7-figure looks different than an 8-figure. We have what we need to get us through the 7 figures. That I have no doubt, or at least strongly into the mid, right? But from a scalability point, what will get us from mid 7 figures won't get us into 8 figures. And I know enough to know I have to actually start building it on the way early side of 7 figures because otherwise I create gaps in our trajectory. And I am looking at continuums and maybe it'll look like a hockey stick when I'm done. But at the same time, I don't want to be stressed out about it. I want to have some fun. I want to make some money. I want my team to make some money. I want our clients to make money. I want it to be what I feel is the new definition of small business. Is a little bit of what Scaling Rich is about, where we have quality of life as the owner. My team has quality of life. My clients have quality of life. We're sharing in the success together. And we can be incredibly profitable doing that. Nothing wrong with making money in business. It's kind of the definition of a commercial enterprise that makes money, right? There's something left over after the end of
Yeah,
it. But there's a lot of dancing that happens in between that because growth will always devour cash. Scalability will always produce it. And so you have to orchestrate the journey in such a way that you can capitalize on both benefits of growth and scalability and still keep the growing with some moments of recovery in there. So I don't know. It's a fun little road
so
trip.
you're actually living what you teach, right?
We
You're
have to. We
yeah,
have to. And I
yeah,
tell everybody that comes into the company, I said, first off, welcome to the place you're going to work on yourself the most. And they're like,
yeah.
what? And I was like, oh, just watch. And then people are like, you told me. I didn't believe you. I was like, because you cannot ask people to do things you are not willing to do yourself. And inevitably, you will have a moment where you're like, you know, what we really need to have happen here is X, Y, and Z. And then you're sitting here in your mind going, and I'm not doing it. So I guess tomorrow I'm doing X, Y, and
So
Z.
you got to
But
walk the talk,
you got
right?
to walk the talk. You got to live in integrity. And I think that's what keeps us having the ability to relate to a business owner, no matter what their revenue is or what stage or age they're in, is that we're right there with you in the trenches. Maybe we're a
So,
little ahead, but
so who's the ideal customer for you? If some of our listeners are out there wondering whether or not you could help them.
So I will say we have a lot of opportunity to help people at different levels. Where people tend to come in is either they'll come in like with our fractional CFO. That's going to be a business probably in the lower end of six figures on the way up. People come in at all sorts of levels there, but it's a great way to start getting structure, right? And if you're going to have growth, you need to make cash. And oftentimes we need another set of eyes to be able to do that adequately. So that is definitely one entry point. We do have people coming in um, at that point in time, like will say a lot of times that Your Biz Rules is the fractional C-suite before you can afford to hire the C-suite. Like you need a lot of things, but you can't hire six people to do it. Those are people that are probably at least mid six figures into seven figures and low seven figure range. And then we have a lot of people that are going, wow, I want to retire in 3 to 5 years, and I don't know if I'm ready. And so we will help with that company to get them scaled and ready to scale. So we have like our first, we're embedding a CEO for a company that's looking to do that. And it's going to be a 2 or 3 year agreement.
So you do succession planning and help them
Yeah.
that piece. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's tough.
we can't do the valuation aspect, although we can get some soft ballparks for you guys. But there's so much that goes into a valuation that if you're paying for it and you haven't done at least your due diligence internally, you're probably wasting that $15,000 to $20,000 it takes to get a good valuation on your business because you're just not ready. And so we'll help you get ready, and then we'll help you build the value of the business.
And do you help people who want to do multi-generational businesses? Because that's a whole get the kids ready to take over the business kind of thing.
It's a whole process.
Yeah.
So yes, we have worked multi-generational before. Really what one of the values that kind of is across all of our clients is a strong family value. And what does that mean for you and what you define as family? That's a very broad context. But generally, there is this aspect of taking care of the family, taking care of the community, being well served in the business. And then ultimately, it's about turning things into impact and legacy. And so we define impact as the ability to create change, transformation, positive, good things, right? But legacy is about the ability to make it everlasting.
Yeah,
So
I often say to people I'm working with, students and other entrepreneurs, that getting out of a business, the only thing harder than starting a business is
it's getting up.
getting out of it because
Yeah.
you have that obligation to your employees and to your customers as well as what you want to achieve with it. So if I this is a great conversation, Leslie. I'm
Oh,
going to
thank
let you get back to work. I know you've got a lot to do. But I just wanted to ask you if you had one piece of advice for our listeners, knowing that a lot of them are business owners or, want to be business owners, what would that one piece of advice be? You've given us a lot of great insights today, and it's probably hard to distill it down to one piece, but what would that be?
you something we haven't quite talked about.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay. Wait and see is not a strategic plan. You will always experience growth through action, whether it's what you wanted or not, right? If it's good, great, you're going to move on. But honestly, sometimes when it doesn't give you what you want, that's a more precious learning that puts you on the pathway to the next thing. So when in doubt, do it.
I love it. That is fantastic advice. And that's the difference between the people that succeed and those that don't,
It
right?
really is.
They
It
they
really is.
they get off that planning couch and they actually do something. It's great advice. Leslie, I know you've got some resources for our listeners. And so
Yes,
could you tell us a little about that and where they can find you and more
sure.
about your book? I mean, your business and your books and everything that you
Sure.
do.
Yeah, so we have a special page just for you if you've tuned in to us today. And that's going to be at yourbizrules.com/infactor. So the name of the podcast. We got a couple things there. One, if you just want to read a little more and figure out what we're talking about, because we've stayed pretty theoretical and strategy based today, you can access First This and That. It's a great tactical book, if you will, of all the things to be building really solid foundations in a business. We have a book club guide there that's free, so you can take that. And then if you're curious, like what does it look like to work with Your Biz Rules, there's a link so you can book an appointment with me right now, and we'll chat about it. See where you are, where you want to go to.
Leslie, this has been a delight to get to know you and to talk about superpowers and all the fun things that we did today. So thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us on the M Factor. And I hope we can stay in touch. And I want to see your business reach those goals over the years.
Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca. It's been a joy.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me for this episode of The In Factor. If Leslie's insights resonated with you, I invite you to share this episode with someone who might benefit from hearing it, maybe a fellow entrepreneur, a coach, or a friend on the edge of growth. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already, and keep an eye out for more details soon on the In Factor Plus, our new learning platform for entrepreneurial thinkers. You can find more resources, including my book, See Do Repeat, on my website at Dr. Rebecca White. That's drrebeccawhite.com. Until next time, keep leaning into your strengths, stay curious, and as always, keep choosing yourself. Thanks for joining me today.